Welcome to Buckets. This is Action Network's WNBA betting podcast, and I'm your host, Maria Marino. Excited to be joined once again by Andrew O'Connor-Watts and Albert Wynn, aka Analytics Capper, for our Best Bets episode on Tuesday, October 8th. We have a winner-take-all Game 5 in the semifinals between the Lynx and Sun. And one of these two teams is going to move on to face the Liberty in the finals. Let's start, fellas, by getting your best bets. Andrew, tip us off.
I'll take the Lynx -1 in the first quarter. I'm also going to add a little sprinkle on a double result. Lynx first half, Sun full game. That's at plus 750.
Albert.
Yeah, so I agree with Andrew there. I like the Lynx first quarter to come out hot and win that game. So Lynx -1, Lynx -1.5. I think both are okay. But I disagree on the second half. I actually think the Lynx are going to pull away. So I like Lynx to win by 11 to 20 points. That's plus 310.
Ooh, I love it. We got some interesting takes here that I feel like we haven't necessarily touched a whole lot here on the podcast. So excited to get into it. Let's not waste any more time, and let me set the stage for this matchup. So the Minnesota Lynx are back home. They are favored by 4.5 here. We have a total of 151.5. The game begins at 8 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2. So a lot happened over the weekend. We had Minnesota take game 3, and they covered the spread of plus 2.5. Game 4, however, Connecticut bounces back, and they cover the spread of -2. So I find it really interesting. Not only are these two teams 2-2 straight up in this series, they're each 2-2 against the spread. Each of them have a win as a dog and as a favorite. What I sort of took away from the last two games is, and our colleague over at Buckets NBA, Matt Moore, will love this term, shooting variance, because in game 3, Marina Mabrey shot 1 of 11 from 3. She was starting that game. She played 36 minutes. And game 4, Bridget Carlton shot 2 of 11 from 3. So pretty much the key shooter on either side, if their shots didn't fall, their team lost in this particular situation. Another thing to watch, Mabrey came off the bench in the last game. She still played 34 minutes, but Ty Harris was kind of the X factor. She started instead for really the first time since game 1 in the first series against the Fever when she got hurt. She had 20 points in 30 minutes, 7 of 11 from the field, including 4 of 5 from 3. I'm not totally sure she's going to replicate that performance, but let's get into the thought process behind the Lynx first quarter -1, -1.5. Andrew, why don't you start, and then we'll get Albert's reasoning.
Yeah, so the Lynx have been by far the best first quarter team in the playoffs this season. They have a plus 16.3 net rating in the first quarter. They start really fast, and the Sun are kind of the opposite. They don't do that at all. They're minus 2.6 in the first quarter. But the Lynx are 3-1 against the spread in this series. Without, the one that they dropped was in that first game, in that game 1 against the Sun, where the Sun just kind of took them by surprise in that game 1. But Connecticut just really struggles to get going early. Both their offense and their defense a lot worse in the first half overall, but that's more of a stark difference in the first quarter, which is why I'm targeting that just the first quarter for this bet. But all of this is kind of consistent with how these teams have played all season. So Minnesota in the regular season was the second best net rating team in the W. They were 12th and the number 1 team at home. They're plus 12.7 net rating in the first quarter at home. Connecticut's solid. I mean, they're a good team, but just plus 1.6. So nothing like crazy, dominant or anything, just kind of a solid team. Now, where I'm going with that first half, second half double result is kind of what I'm talking about. This is a kind of a Jekyll and Hyde Sun team when it comes to the first half versus the second half. So Second half offense is 102.6 offensive rating for the first half, 112.2 in the second half. That's in these playoffs. And then their best second half team in the playoffs with 13.9 net rating. Minnesota just minus 6.5 in the second half. Connecticut has covered every single second half line. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to win the game, or, they could be down by a lot at half and come back and still cover that second half line and not necessarily win. But I mentioned the odds earlier. It's plus 750. So at plus 750, that bet only has to hit 11.76% of the time. And given the fact that they're a worse first half team and a much better second half team, I'll take that double result for the Sun and Lynx. So plus 750, double result, Lynx -1 to start it off.
Spicy. Okay, so Albert, first let's get your thoughts on just the first quarter and why you like that specifically.
Yeah, you mentioned Marina Mabrey was, basically bench, so she wasn't a starter, but it actually didn't work out. Minnesota actually got out to a really quick start in game 4. They were up at halftime. It wasn't until the second half where Connecticut just started hitting, all these long range shots. I think they hit a total of 8 threes total for that game. But I think there's just going to be a little bit of shooter's regression here. They're not a great shooter from the outside, whereas we know with the Lynx, it kind of snowballs. If they start hot, it's almost like other teams can't sustain the pace that the Lynx can do in terms of shooting. So I like the first quarter. I mean, they were up at halftime. They blew in the second half. I think they're going back home now. There's going to be a lot of energy with the crowd. It's going to be, again, only 1 day's rest. I think this is really important for these two teams. Minnesota is the younger, fresher, more athletic team. Connecticut is more of the, veteran playoff season. They're a really, really good defensive-minded team, but I think on 1 day's rest, and we'll get to this a little bit later, but they haven't done well throughout the whole year in terms of 1 day's rest. So I like Minnesota to get off really hot and get going early in the first quarter. It's one of those games where I actually think Minnesota is going to be, I call it always. That's what I usually call it when I like a side. When I really, really like a side, I say Minnesota always. So it'd be first quarter, first half, full game. But instead of chasing the -4, because it did open at -3 for the full game and the steam has gone out to 4, I would take the alternate spread. So that's why I'm looking at, double digit results and things like that. So I don't know, Maria, if you want to get into my second cap, but my first quarter, I like the Lynx to come out with a lot of energy. And as long as they hit 2 or 3 threes in that first quarter, I don't think the Sun can sustain.
Well, I'll just respond quickly to sort of your first point, Albert, because, even though Mabrey came off the bench, I like that you pointed out that it didn't really work. Like pretty much as soon as the Sun took that first time out, they put Mabrey right into the game because they really didn't have anything going. And then, to your point, and Andrew discussed this too, about the second half, the Sun just playing a whole lot better. For some reason, in that third quarter of game 4, Minnesota just went stagnant. They only scored 13 points to Connecticut's 25. And again, Bridget Carlton really not being a threat from deep. Well, I mean, she's still a threat. Like you still have to, respect, and it affects, the defensive spacing and whatnot, but she wasn't knocking him down. So it wasn't really becoming a factor in the game. So I particularly agree with, it's hard to disagree with the numbers that Andrew laid out in terms of just how good the Lynx have generally been in the first quarter. And Albert, in terms of the Sun player makeup, we know DeWanna Bonner's on the older side, and all respect, we hear that the broadcast mention a lot of times where she stands on all-time scoring lists and playoff scoring lists, and she's just she is a veteran player that has a lot of experience. And then Alyssa Thomas, she's playing almost every minute of the game. So, like at some point that could come into play. I never think she looks tired necessarily, but given that she plays so many minutes and she plays at such an intense like level of physicality, like that, I could see that becoming a factor. But that being said, let's get further into, Albert, this idea of Lynx to win by 11 to 20 points.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of those players that, get a lot of heavy minutes or they take on a lot of workload, and props to them. But I feel like that's why the WNBA playoffs are so great, because the superstars really do show up. They do expect to basically play every single minute. So these players are really good at conserving energy when needed. And so that's why players like Thomas and Bonner can play a lot of minutes. With that being said, for the year, Connecticut Sun are 3-8 in their last 11 games with 1 day rest. Contrastly with Minnesota, a younger team, higher paced team, with 1 day's rest for them, they are 11-4 against the spread. So this team thrives on playing a tired team because of how quick they play. And again, Maria, we talked about this the last time I was on a few weeks ago. Maybe it's been a month now, but I really, really liked Minnesota heading to the playoffs just because of their shooting ability. And again, I think if they're able to get off to a hot start, which me and Andrew both agree that is probably the side for the first quarter, most likely first half as well, I think it snowballs. And that's where Andrew and I kind of differ, because I think those tired legs and all those miles that we just mentioned, they're going to catch up to Connecticut. They are on the road in this game, and historically, we know game 5s and game 7s throughout basketball usually favor the home team. So I just like Minnesota, and I think the energy of the crowd is really going to have this snowball effect. And we saw even the Aces versus Liberty game. It was, I don't know, like a 12-point game with a minute and a half. It wasn't like the Aces were trying to foul and get it closer. Like, they dribbled out the clock. I think that's what what's going to happen here as well. Like, I think Connecticut's going to concede if it's an 8-9 point game. I think Minnesota is going to be able to push it to double digits in the end.
Ooh, so interesting. Okay, Andrew, I want your rebuttal, but first I just want to mention that, to your point about the just potential fatigue, I mean, the whole thing, if you go back to game 3, and Andrew, you'll remember this well because you were on our last episode, and I took Marina Maybury's points, I think it was over 15.5, which had actually gone down from the prior game. So I really liked that. I think she finished with 14. She took 20 shots. Yeah. Like, I'm not even mad that I bet that, because like the volume was there. She just didn't knock them down, but it was clear throughout that game. She just looked gassed. Like, she just every single shot was short. And like, I think with the makeup of the Connecticut Sun, because they only have so many shooters and like very few, they have to ride with they're going to have to ride with Maybury. Maybe they'll get something out of Ty again. Maybe DeWanna Bonner will heat up, but like, they don't have a lot of other options. So even if that, that player, somebody like a Maybury is like, there's nothing else you can really counter with. Like, you gotta leave her out there because she can, theoretically shoot the ball. So, Andrew, let's get some thoughts from you now on this.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think Maybury is a huge catalyst for them. She's hugely important. It's really difficult for them to get going offensively without her making shots. Like, I think that's, like you said, I mean, betting her points prop would be not a bad look, I think, in this game either, just because, they're going to need her to get going. They're going to give her those looks similar to that game 3. I mean, if she takes 20 shots again, and she doesn't go over again, that's a good play, right? I mean, like you said, the volume is there. Specifically,
counter. Yeah. She only took 10 shots in the last game.
True.
Interesting.
Yeah. And she only had 10 points. I mean, that, I do think, I guess my thing is, like, while she's very important offensively, she's like, we saw last game, she doesn't have to score that much for them to win. We've seen that route already with them taking a game without her going off. So that's kind of where I'm not as concerned about it. Like, I definitely think, like I said, I still like taking her points over just because she's at least going to get the looks, probably, I think. I mean, again, you pointing out that she didn't have them last game is significant. But, kind of more to Albert's point and where we differ with that second half look, great stat with against the spread on 1 day's rest. I think that's really that's a good look. And it definitely speaks to the different like team profiles with the age and experience and athleticism. For me, it doesn't bother me that much. First of all, because the bet that I'm on is plus 750. Like I said, I mean, this is more that is mispriced in my opinion. I mean, I just think that's the wrong price for this, for a team that is better in the second half than the Lynx and a team that is better in the first half, the way the Lynx are over the Sun. So to have that result be the longest odds is just wrong in my opinion. Does that mean it's going to happen, 9 out of 10 times? No, but it doesn't have to. All it has to do is happen 15 out of 100 times for this to, I mean, even less than that, actually 12 out of 100 times for me to be profitable in this scenario. So yeah, to me, I honestly, if the Sun don't win, I hope they win. I hope the Lynx win by 11 and you cash your bet, Albert, because
Yeah.
I just think, like I said, I just think it's mispriced.
I do want to jump in. I want to get on my soapbox for a couple of seconds here because someone sharp like Andrew, he's going to find, mispriced stuff in the market. And he's not trying to win 100% of his bets, but he's basically putting his chips in the fact that if he can find 10 mispriced things a week, he's going to cash out on, a good number of them so that his ROI is positive. So I do want to mention that it is a plus 750 bet. It's an awesome look because we know Connecticut, their defense does wear on teams. And if you're unable to score, and this is going to be, Minnesota's, it's a, frontier they've never been before, right? Late fourth quarter, if they win, they make the finals. Like that is not an easy way to close a game. So if Connecticut can really come out and show their seasoned veteran and really lean on that defense, then yeah, I could definitely see a path for that. So it's almost one of those things where maybe if you don't want to do any of these bets, you do two. You do Sun money line or you do Lynx by 20, right? Because it's just going to be one of those games where if one goes one way, I think it is going to have a snowball effect on the rest of the game.
Yeah, I think this is so interesting. Might maybe a little unlikely, but I feel like there is a pathway to both of your bets in the sense that the Lynx could come out blazing in the first half, and the Sun could fight back. I do think that a closer game, like if you get to a tight game down the stretch, I think that benefits Connecticut because I think they showed in game one. When they got tight and they got scrappy, like they kind of were the more poised team. And I think a part of that is just that competitive edge that they play with, like, led by Alyssa Thomas. They're just, even Marina Maybury too, I just think is a dog. And like, I could see it if it gets a little too close for comfort. Minnesota might struggle with that. So, I mean, obviously they would prefer to have a comfortable lead and, sort of have this in hand so that this doesn't come down to a late game execution, executing a game winning play, that sort of thing. So, I've been toying with, who's a better matchup for the Liberty, who's a better team overall to make the finals. And I'm kind of having a hard time figuring that out because I do think that these teams are pretty evenly matched. We talked about coming in, they're the top two defenses in terms of points allowed, the Lynx and the Sun. And this series it's been really close. Like we're in a decisive game 5. Like I said, 2-2 straight up, 2-2 against the spread for both of these teams. Even the season series, Minnesota 3-4 straight up, 4-3 against the spread. in the 7 games. So I don't know, man, like this could go either way, but I think both of you have identified some really solid ways to bet this game, and with solid data to back it up. So anyone have anything else to add here? Andrew, Albert?
I do think, I guess one other thing is, kind of to Albert's point of bringing up those days rest and the against the spread look. One thing that kind of, I think that's a great stat. Again, as I said before, a lot of those, though, I think were early season games where the Lynx were being very, very undervalued. They were dogs to teams like the Mystics, the Dream, teams that we know they are much, much better than. So I think some of those numbers aren't necessarily what I'm as concerned about in this instance. And then the final thing being, if Connecticut, like, that might be true that they're not good on 1 day's rest. I think if anything, if there's a time where they're just going to pull through and just, give it their all, I think it's a game 5 in this scenario. So that's all I want to say about that. So
my final point, is I think the Liberty would rather see Connecticut Sun. Okay, so I think if the Sun were to advance and get into the finals,
Agreed.
my bet would be Liberty to sweep. But if the Lynx get in, it's that shot variance, right? I liken them to the Boston Celtics the last time I was on this show. I just think when they're hitting their threes, they're one of the, if not the elite team to beat. Just because they're super undervalued, like Andrew says, even to this day, I think they're still undervalued because they're not Vegas, because they're not the Liberty, right? So I like the Lynx shot. I think I think they are a live dog against the Liberty, because if New York goes cold, I think the Lynx have enough offense to really compete with them. Whereas Connecticut, man, Maria made a really good point, and a lot of this capping is going to be on, the body language that we see. I think Connecticut is just running on fumes. So if they were able to push through in this game 5 on the road in Minnesota against a better offensive team, props to them, but I don't think they have enough energy for the Liberty.
Completely agree.
Oh, this is so great, because I basically got a 2-for-1 here appearance from Albert, because I got bets for next series depending on how it goes. But keep in mind, if whoever wins this game 5, they're only going to be on 1 day rest going into game 1 of the finals, because game 1 is Thursday. That's gonna be so critical. And I couldn't agree more. I think the Lynx going into the season, I mean, can you guys believe in preseason their win total was set at 14.5? And we said, Jim Turvey and Dan Omataya and I, on our, season preview, we were like, over and Lynx to make the playoffs, like, hello. And then, like, very quickly it became apparent that they were going to be not just a playoff team, but, one of the top teams in the league. So there's a little bit of that going on. I also think that this is just, we're just musing at this point, but I do think there is more of a confidence against Connecticut. For whatever reason, the Liberty have generally owned them in their head-to-head matchups over the last couple seasons. They knocked them out of the postseason last year. The Lynx, though, there's a little bit of that like a ghost thing going on. Like, they won the Commissioner's Cup, but let's not forget last year, the Liberty won the Commissioner's Cup over the Aces, and the Aces got their revenge, in the finals. But I do think the games between the Liberty and New York have been, that series has been a little tighter. So we shall see who we get. But I mean, it sounds like, let's all bets aside just for a moment, it sounds like in general, Albert, you are leaning the Lynx to advance. Andrew, maybe you believe a little bit more in the Sun. Is that accurate?
I actually fully agree with Albert. If these two teams advance, I think the Liberty want to see the Sun way more than the Lynx. So I fully agree there. I think in this particular matchup, I think it's a little more of a toss-up, but I think for those finals, I do think the Lynx are a much better opponent for the Liberty because of some of those things that you mentioned, the athleticism, the defense, and the offense. Sun are kind of more focused defensively, but they're just, the Lynx are just a better matchup for the Liberty. We've seen them go back and forth. Lynx won the Commissioner's Cup, and then Liberty won that game following the Commissioner's Cup that we actually went to in person. Yeah. So
throwback.
I think as a W fan, I actually would rather see the Lynx win this one and have us get a little rematch of that Commissioner's Cup. But $750, I can't stay away.
I know. I'm kind of I might be with you on that, but again, I think it'll be good no matter what. But Albert, I'll let you get the last word here on the pod. Closing thoughts.
Give me the Lynx to win the whole thing. Just give it to me. I took them heading into the playoffs. I'm going to take them again right now. I think it's a great spot. It's the youth exuberance for me that I love from this team. And you just have one of those teams every few years, right? All the pressure is going to be on New York if they match up in the finals.
This is amazing. I did not bank on all these Albert hot takes that we are getting here late in the show. I just got to give you the floor, but this is like I said, it's spicy. I'll use that term again. All right. I think we've had our fill. I'm going to end it right there on a high note. Want to thank everybody once again for listening to Buckets. We're going to be back Thursday to preview the finals. It's going to be so good. Albert Wynn and Andrew O'Connor-Watts, I want to say thank you for hopping on the show again.
Thanks, Maria.
And if you like what you hear, please rate and review the podcast. Also, download the award-winning Action app if you haven't yet. We'll all be tracking our bets in there. Good luck, everybody, and let's get buckets.